Now, do I
Yeah,
call you a beekeeper or an apiarist or how? A
yes, yeah,
honeymaker?
yeah, all of the above. Custodian of the humble bee. Yeah, it's a passion and it's a job, but it's one that you would only do if you're very passionate about it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I met Paul, I must tell you, at a lunch that John Quirk put on the other day down at the Old Lion. And we got into a conversation about bees, and I just couldn't believe that something as serious as this plague or this virus has just gone under the radar, that people aren't talking about this. It is really serious, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, so it's a parasite, the Varroa mite. We were the last country in the world to be free from it, and it has come here through our leaky biosecurity one way or another. Nobody knows how it got here, but it got here in the early 2020s, thereabouts. And since then has spread through the three eastern states and now into South Australia. So, yeah, widespread and presents a lot of challenges.
Well, what have you got? You've got border controls, but you can't stop the bees flying across the border, can you?
No, so yeah, there was border closures early on to so-called slow the spread, and that maybe not have been a bad thing. But how that's being managed now between South Australia and the eastern states is very questionable, to say the least. We have the Varroa mite, we have the resistant mite here in South Australia as well, and yet we still have border closures for some individuals in the industry and not for others, and that's where it becomes very, very concerning.
Well, what determines whether you've got a border closure or you haven't got a border closure?
Yeah, a very big question. We have a situation at the moment where we've been pleading to have access to queen bees from the east, and it's been very difficult to get them from New South Wales, which is one of the main queen breeding areas and essential to the health of our hives to have good genetics.
Why do you need queen bees from somewhere else?
We don't have any commercial queen breeders in South Australia that can produce the numbers of queens that commercial beekeepers in South Australia acquire.
How many do you need?
Approximately one per hive. So most commercial beekeepers requeen their hives every year, or at least every second year.
You see, I don't even know how it works. Walk us through this. You've got a box.
So so each colony has one queen in it, and to keep good genetics, that are gentle to work, that are healthy, they are young and virile. The easiest way to do that is to replace the queen every year or every second year at the most.
God.
And yeah,
it's a dangerous profession.
That doesn't seem right.
No, it's a bit like that. But they get mailed at Australia Post all over the country.
You're mailing queen bees around the place.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, New South Wales has a lot of export of queen bees to Canada as well. So it's not only they don't only supply Australia; they supply overseas. Yeah.
What does a queen bee look like? Different to an ordinary humble bumblebee?
No, it's much the same, just a much longer abdomen and slightly bigger thorax. So just basically like an enlarged bee, pretty much. But yeah, very, very distinctly bigger than any other bee you've ever seen.
And her role is?
Well, she runs the hive, but her main role, she controls the hive through pheromones, but she also lays all the eggs that breed the next generation of bees. And so she can lay up to more than her own body weight in eggs in a day in the peak of the season, which is incredible. When the eggs are so tiny, you can barely see them with a naked eye.
God. And then you've got all of the other worker bees.
Correct. So they're all her daughters.
All her daughters?
Yeah, and a crazy fact about bees
Wait, where's the man? Where's the male?
That's the crazy fact about bees, is that a male bee called a drone is an unfertilized egg. So a drone only has a mum. It doesn't have a dad, but it has a grandpa. So it's a very interesting thing. So an unfertilized egg produces a male bee. So the male is a direct clone of his mum.
Well, it sounds complicated, but it clearly works and has worked for millions of years.
Yes, yes.
So the ordinary bees go out there and they collect the pollen, and in collecting the pollen to bring back to the hive to make the honey, they fertilize, they pollinate the crops.
Pretty much. So yeah, there's two parts to it, and this is what a lot of people don't realise. There's two parts to a bee's diet. There's the pollen, which is the protein, and then there's the nectar, which is the carbohydrate which makes the honey.
Yes.
So when we eat honey, we're eating the nectar of the flower, but the bees also need the pollen for their body protein to make them physically strong. And at the moment, it's sort of the catchphrase. Everyone knows that, without a healthy bee industry, we don't have pollinated food. So I think it's 3 out of 5 mouthfuls of food we consume is pollinated by bees. What's a little known fact is that without a healthy honey industry, we don't have a healthy pollination service. And that's where we're going wrong, in my opinion, is without protecting our honey industry, we don't have healthy, strong bees to do pollination services.
It's a strange sort of setup. I mean, it really would convince you that there is a God, because it's really something that's been done by design, and that God, God sounds a little bit in this context as being a woman.
Well, no, I don't think so, but that's my personal belief. But I love my job because it keeps me close to nature and close to God. So yeah, but that's another story for another day. But yeah.
Well, what happens? Nature is an incredibly complicated thing. I know, but you'd imagine that over the millennia, we would have figured, or nature would have figured out a more reliable way of doing this. Because if for one reason or another, bushfires, as you say, a mite like this, a virus like this,
yes,
or bad weather or something like that could wipe out huge numbers of bees, which would have an enormous effect on the food production of the country.
Well, true, but this is where little man's got very smart, and our monocrops requiring huge movement of these mass numbers of bees is where we start running into issues. But it's all very easily protected if we had a heart to do it. There's two things we're missing here in the country, and this would, I think, probably alarm you, Jeremy. We don't have an adequate quality standard for honey. So our standard for honey basically means that pretty much anything, well, don't quote me, but I think it's 75% reducing sugars, can be labelled as honey. So there's two things we need. We need a quality standard for honey, and we need an import risk assessment to stop these syrups and toxic syrups and things coming in and being labelled as honey and watering down our good quality Australian honey. If we can protect our honey industry and supply the consumer with good quality, safe honey that tastes fantastic, we'll naturally take care of our bee industry and therefore of our pollination. But the precarious situation we're in the moment is the importation of syrups and honeys from questionable origin is putting our industry in a very vulnerable place. And at the same time, we're being forced out of our historic beekeeping country. Like at the moment, currently, as I speak, I'm in the Narcat Conservation Park. And that was established by Premier Corcoran in 1979 as a national park for beekeeping. And it had 300 sites, near enough to 300 sites for beekeeping. It was some forefathers of our industry that realised the need for a beekeeping reserve, and they lobbied the Premier of the day to turn this into a national park for beekeeping. But as it stands at the moment, we're slowly being restricted in our use of these historic beekeeping areas. And my understanding is there was around about 1,000 public land and national park sites across the state historically, and currently we're down to probably around about 150.
Well, who's responsible for that?
So, yeah, it's I think as an industry we're doing a very poor job of lobbying government to understand the importance of having these resting sites for our bees to build them up for the pollination events.
Yeah. And
also they're perceived as an introduced species, which is true. But at the same time, they interact extremely well with the bush and the native bees, and they don't harm them in any way. And there's been studies done that have proven that.
Well, be very, very careful, Paul, because, this very day, they're up there in the highlands of New South Wales and Victoria shooting brumbies, wild horses, who really have a wonderful place in our history. And the reason they're doing it is that the, I don't know what they call themselves, the Introduced Species Committee or something, an Aboriginal on that particular board has said that he wants them killed because they remind him of colonial times. They were an introduced species. So these guys get if you'll pardon the expression, a bee in their bonnet. They'll come after you.
Well, we are. We're kind of, in a kind of a way, we are the Brumbies of the Highlands, us beekeepers in national parks across this beautiful country. But the bizarre part about all of this is the graziers and the beekeepers were the original conservationists. And as this national park stands here, the one I'm in at the moment, the only reason that's a national park is because of beekeepers. If this wasn't for beekeepers, this would have been grazed.
Well, what are we going to do? I mean, you've got to get a member of parliament, a bee representative, or I don't know.
We have a lot of problems because we have massive inaction and corruption within PIRSA, and that's been historical. We have we have a few people in the industry that have mates in high places that wrought the system for their own ends, as we've seen with these border closures being applied willy-nilly. And in all honesty, the growing sentiment amongst what I would class as the good professional beekeepers in the state is that, and this is being openly said now, that if the whole of PIRSA bee section took a long walk off a short jetty, the industry may start to progress.
Well, I don't know. What do you call that body again?
Primary Industries and Resources of South Australia.
Who runs that?
PIRSA.
Who runs that?
Well, the minister is Claire Scriven, and she's a wonderful person. But the trouble with these departments now is they're so institutionalised that the departments are running the minister than the other way around.
Yeah,
and
yes, I can imagine.
And that's where it's getting scary. Is one of the main individuals in the B section of PIRSA has had that job since the late 80s or early 90s.
Well, and truly entrenched.
Absolutely. That presents lots of problems.
Something that is as important as the mass production of food, it just can't be diminished. I mean, it really should be a front page leading story around the place.
Yeah, and I think the latest figure that I'm aware of was the Curtin University put out 22 billion, that's with a B, of nationally produced food that relies on bee pollination.
Well, of course it's with a B.
Yeah, that's right. But there's a big but on this, is I always say, but are you aware that without bees we don't have, for instance, a racehorse industry? And people say, how do you figure that out? Well, lucerne seed is 100% reliant on bee pollination. And what do horses eat? Lucerne hay. Like the ramifications of the bee industry are huge. And if you took out not only the pollination reliant industries as almonds and lucerne seed, all the cucurbits as in melons, then you have vegetables. Now, vegetables don't require bee pollination, but the vegetable seed to grow the vegetable plants, that's a huge industry of small seed industry which requires bee pollination. Then secondary to that, we have all the secondary industries as in dairying, racehorses, the list just goes on and on and on, of industries that rely on a product that's grown from product that was pollinated by bees. So we are massively underrepresented and underappreciated. But we need to do better as an industry in getting that message to the public.
So what actually is being used at the moment to combat the Varroa mite?
So currently we have a bunch of chemicals that we can use. There's basically two groups. There's the organics and then there's the hard chemicals, the veterinary chemicals. Now, what's happening in New South Wales at the moment, and it's basically actually spread to South Australia. It started in Queensland, it spread to New South Wales, Victoria, now South Australia, is we're finding that we have a resistant mite, which is 100% resistant to the pyrethroids that are the hard chemicals that are able to be used to treat the mite. So basically we've had half of our chemical group removed from our ability to control those mites. So now we're down to the bunch of chemicals which are loosely referred to as organics, which are much safer for the food product but probably more dangerous to apply. Where we need the industry to go, and our industry body's doing, in my opinion, a very poor job of lobbying for this, is we need own use exemption for those organic chemicals. And whilst we need a much better skill set to use those chemicals, we can treat our hives at a very, very low cost and produce a very safe food product, because those organics are naturally found in honey anyway. So we're not adding anything into the hive that's not currently in it.
Well, I think they should be talking to you. I can't imagine I don't know whether it's a conspiracy theory or not. But
well, I could go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, I'm not sure name calling is healthy in this environment.
No, but why would we have a bureaucracy that was actively working against the interests of the farmer and the beekeeper and the community generally? And they would think what? That's they're doing their job?
To understand that, we need to look at a little bit of history. We need to look in the review mirror. We used to have a committee called the Federal Council, and the Federal Council did the job that is now taken over by a body called ARBIC, which is the Australian Honeybee Industry Council. The Australian Honeybee Industry Council is funded via donated money. Now, one guess and no prizes as to who donates the majority of that money to run that organisation is none other than Capilano and their suppliers. So the business model of Capilano doesn't make money out of packing Australian honey. They make their money from imported honey and blending it with Australian honey and putting it on the shelf at an inflated price. So it's a hugely complex, hugely fraught.
And you've got clearly there are competing interests here. But
very clearly,
I think we need some sort of adjudicator who's going to say, well, we make decisions in the interests of the people and in the interests of local industry.
Yes.
Paul, keep in touch with us, will you?
Yeah, would love to. And thank you very much for taking the time to get the knowledge of our industry out there to the public. Really appreciate it.
Not at all, Paul. Paul Volk.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, and I know that his product is wonderful because Senator Quirk has given me a container of this absolutely beautiful honey. But the thing that amazes me is that you've got these little tiny bees and I know they're busy, but they go out there and they work from morning till dark.
They don't go on strike.
They don't go on strike, no.
Don't want a pay rise.
And when you see them, I sometimes sort of rescue them out of the pond out there. And they've got sometimes so laden down with pollen on their feet that they are finding it hard to fly back to the hive. But in any case, they're carrying a little tiny amount of pollen.
Dot.
It's Dogden, is it?
It's a dot.
It's a dot.
Mm.
Well, it adds up, though.
Absolutely.
You know, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of bees with these little legs. They've got nothing to carry the pollen with, have they?
No.
So they stick it on their legs and they bring it back.
That's the